Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Shayan Desharkar. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Unified. The thing I want to tell you about Unified is we're your hosts. We're here to have you here today. We're so excited. This is impossibly cool to have this event. Actually, I mean that word impossible literally because, little secret, we didn't have anything planned for this event like just 2 months ago. So it all came together in that time. If I had told you 2 months ago that we were going to have this kick-ass South by event with amazing speakers and all these amazing activists going to be in attendance, you would be well within your right to say, Shayan, that is not possible. But, you know, that's why community is important, right? Because when we started thinking of this event 2 months ago, we started talking to folks. We talked to our friends. They started talking to their friends, folks like Alicia over there, Anthony, Shannon, others. They started talking to their friends. And this kind of like community formed around the event, right? It was a community not just of the speakers that are here today, but also of all those friends that got the word out, folks who put us in touch with vendors, people who told us like how to do this all, and of course, all of you that are here today. You know, you guys are the community behind the event. So that, you know, you guys made the impossible possible. And you know, that's what community does as a whole, right? It takes things that are hard, scary, things that we don't think might be possible, and it turns into stuff that's like fun, joyful, and not just like possible, but like an undeniable thing that's going to happen. And that's what this event is all about. It's celebrating that kind of spirit that you guys put into your work in the community, where you take on the issues that our neighborhoods face, that our society faces, and you meet them head on. You know, with commitment and intention they require, yeah, but also with joy and love that permeates through all of you. So yeah, that's what this event's about. That's what we're kind of celebrating today. We're gonna have an amazing lineup for everyone. So excited to have all of you here today. The lineup is crazy. Y'all have seen it. We've got council members in the house. We've got undercover investigators. We've got, who else? Progressive tech wizards, jaw-dropping artists, and just wonderfully amazing, engaging community leaders. So yeah, grab some food, grab some drink. We've got some coffee, some breakfast tacos. We've got some beer. I mean, it's only 9 a.m., but you know, thanks everyone for being here, and yeah, let's get this thing started.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for getting here early. My name is Ed Espinoza. I'm the president of Progress Texas, which focuses on message development and media for progressive issues in Texas. We've been around for about a decade. We work with the traditional media to make sure that the progressive side of the story is covered, and we generate our own media. We have a podcast. Check it out sometime. It's called The Happy Hour. And I'm up here with a couple of guests today that I'd like to introduce. To my left is Alicia Roth. Is it Weigel or Weigel?
Weigel. Alicia
Roth Weigel, who I've known for many years. Just always know. We used to share an office. Alicia is a human rights commissioner for the city of Austin, where she has contributed to legislation on sexual assault, human trafficking, and many other social health issues. She is a constant advocate for intersex rights, body autonomy, and health care for all. She's also a very prolific presence on social media. If you follow her, you know what I'm talking about. Thanks for joining us.
Instagram. And theoretically, I'm on TikTok as well. I don't know.
Next to Alicia is Chris Harris. Chris is the Director of Policy for the Austin Justice Coalition, a grassroots activist-led organization addressing criminal justice reform, as well as economic and social justice at the local level. He has also been a presence in Austin as we have tried to find our way through the issue addressing homelessness, issue with police reform, and so many other societal issues that we've taken up over the past 2 years. Chris has been on the front lines. Chris, thanks for joining us. Sitting next to Chris is my new friend, Lauren Windsor. Lauren is between DC and LA, two of the two cities I lived in before I lived here in Austin. If you aren't following Lauren's efforts to uncover the inner workings of conservative groups like the Koch brothers and Project Veritas, then you are missing out. Her work on the political web show, The Undercurrent, and as the executive director of American Family Voices has been featured on CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and many other outlets. If you're not following her on Twitter, you should. Thanks, Lauren. Last but certainly not least, Councilmember Natasha Harper-Madison, a native of East Austin, has seen firsthand the strengths of struggles of her community. She's a constant champion for housing, mobility, and expanded economic opportunities. She just wrapped up a tenure as Mayor Pro Tem in the city of Austin and is a general all-around badass. Thank you for everything you do. And I don't think we all we didn't plan this, but a lot of us are showing the colors of Ukraine up here this morning, so happy coincidence. Maybe it's all on our mind. All right, so I want to start with a broad question for everybody. And Lauren, I'm going to direct this to you, and then folks, you can jump in as you may. What does it mean to be a progressive today? Not just the issues, but as a progressive, like, what is it?
To me, being a progressive, particularly vis-a-vis conservatism, is all about how do we best harness government to work for the people. Conservatism looks at government and says, we want to strangle it in a bathtub, right? They don't believe that government is helpful to people. Democrats, progressives they should believe that government is helpful to people. And, conservatives, I think, would say the redistribution of wealth and socialism. And it's really just putting in place mechanisms that give historically marginalized communities equal footing so that we actually can attain the American dream, so that we do have not the equality of outcomes, but we at least have some starting place that gives people greater opportunity.
And whatever that means too, because like the American dream doesn't mean what it used to mean, right? Like for so many years we were taught that it meant like a car, a single family home with a car in the driveway. As Mario Cuomo once said, Republicans say we should have no more government than we need. But what they also should say is that we should also have all the government that we do need. And council member, I think that's something that you are very in tune with, being that you are the government, the local government anyway.
All the things that you think are wrong, they are. I've seen behind the curtain. I've seen the tiny little wizard moving the machine around. And it's one of those things, it's like, once you saw it, you can't unsee it. I've said I was one and done. I came in here because I was pissed off. I was like, I'm going to do this because I'm mad. And I believe in me. I believe that I'm extraordinary and I think I can make some changes. But then once you get here, you go, dang. Delia Garza, she and my husband went through cadet class together. So I've known her for 20 years.
The fire department.
The fire department, correct. And they worked at their first fire station together for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And she says, what do you want to do when you get here? No, first of all, she said, are you sure you want to do that? I was like, no, I'm sure and I'm mad. I'm going to do it. And so I gave her this long list of things that I wanted to get done. And she belly laughed at me to my face. She said, tear that list up, pare it down to maybe 3 things, and you'll be so lucky if you get 2 of them done. Everything that has to go through the process that is our democracy, it takes too long and it costs too much. And so I've found myself as a person who identifies as a progressive person, recognizing we all trash. Democrats trash, Republicans trash, conservatives, everybody trash. We're all trash because we bring ourselves to the game, right? We're fallible as humans and we bring ourselves to the game. And so I found myself at the place where it's like, I do identify as a progressive person, as a person who lives in a state, the singular state in our entire republic, by the way, that ever explicitly said no person formerly enslaved or indentured shall ever be emancipated. Our state constitution. Get out of here. What I'm supposed to do here? All I can do is my best. And as a progressive person, what I bring to the table is the recognition that we all trash. And we're just out here doing our best. And we just want it to be better for the people who come behind us. And in my mind's eye, that's what it means to be a progressive person. Just do your best given the circumstances that we're up against.
Do you ever find yourself as a council member saying, I don't make the rules, and then you stop and you, well, actually.
Wait a minute. Hold up.
Alicia?
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on what the council member was saying, it's like the idea that we're constantly learning and growing, and progressivism isn't some badge, like this label, like I am a progressive. It's like an action. It's like I am committed to constantly being curious and including more people in our movement. Conservatism wants to harken back to some mythical time when things were theoretically great for everybody. Maybe they were really great for like certain people. But I think progressivism is really, for me, to be progressive, it's not an adjective, it's really a verb. It's like we are constantly moving forward and we have the understanding that progress is a good thing and that the future can be way better than the past. And for me, like that's inspiring. Like it's optimistic. It's not saying like, I want to go back to this time when like things were really good for me and my people. It's like, no, we can move forward to a time where things are really good for everybody, for all people.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And piggybacking off of that, I feel like also it looks, really critically at the status quo. It's not just about the past being something that we can improve upon, but it also says, hey, right now, the situation we're living in now, how can we really improve it? And always looking for ways to do that, never being afraid of change, never being afraid of that progress. And I think, I think the other piece of it too, and I totally understand the process because I've been there, and it's very difficult to manage, but it's also not being afraid of big change. Ultimately, I think I think progressivism was a necessary offshoot of more standard liberalism, which saw some contentment in the status quo, built by FDR, built by OBJ, built by Clinton. And progressivism says, well, wait, there's still really big problems and they can't be solved on the margins by tweaking at the edges with, a market-based solution. It's got to be big new things, taking those sort of thoughts from the past, of past progressive movements and really pushing big changes forward and understanding, that we can make it actually all better. Not that we always will, but that we can.
The root of that is progress, and it's challenging the things that we're used to. It's introducing ourselves to new things. And for me, I think the trans movement represents a lot of that, because I remember when we were talking about the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance back in 2015 and how they were trying to really clamp down on LGBT equality when it came to like allowing civil unions for city workers, among other things. But that the trans piece of that was new to me, and it was something I didn't know a whole lot about, but it was moving forward, challenging our concepts of what we understood and accepting them as new things, which takes me to the new questions. The reason I bring that up is because what are the issues that define progressivism right now? And like I look at this array of folks on this stage right here, and there are so many issues that that you all work on that I think embodies what progressivism is fighting for right today. So question number 2 is, what are the most important issues facing progressives today? And feel free to jump in at any time. But I'm going to start with you, Alicia. I see you reaching for your mic already.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, there's so many issues we need to talk about, and I'll try to think of some that I know that other folks won't touch on this stage. You mentioned the trans movement, and right now, obviously, there are horrific attacks on trans children. There's a rally at the governor's mansion at 2 p.m. on Sunday, if y'all want to be there. A lot of what's not being discussed is those same attacks, the memo from Ken Paxton, the subsequent opinion from Governor Abbott, are also attacking intersex children. There's specific language. They refer to it as disorders of sex development. So they use this like codified language to try to confuse people, which is why the media is not picking up on it, because people know very little about the intersex movement. But for me, I would be remiss if I didn't mention I'm up here wearing the colors of the intersex flag. We need to fight for intersex kids who have medically unnecessary, non-consensual procedures forced upon their bodies. I was sterilized as a kid. A lot of kids have their genitals rearranged without asking for it. There's a lot of really messed up medical abuse happening to intersex kids. I've actually worked with Councilmember Harper-Madison on addressing and bringing this to light. In the city of Austin, we passed an ordinance, 6 months ago? Time in COVID is very confusing, to fund an education campaign with the city of Austin. I'm now working with Austin Public Health on that to educate people about this issue. So I do urge y'all to Google intersex justice and learn more, but I do also want to expand it and talk about the bigger issue at play, which is body autonomy and consent. So when you look at abortion rights, which thank God we're now using the word abortion, that's progress right there. 5 years ago, we had to refer to it as like reproductive rights. Like abortion was this boogeyman. You couldn't even talk about it. So when you talk about abortion, when you talk about trans rights, when you talk about intersex rights, when you talk about sex worker rights, when you talk about sexual assault, when you talk about human trafficking, it's all the same thing. It's they're trying to take away our consent in decisions about what happens to our body, whether it's who we have sex with, whether it's what our bodies look like, the anatomy that we have included in our bodies, the work that we do with our bodies. And so for me, a really important component of the progressive movement is just kind of like how abortion was this boogeyman word we weren't allowed to refer to a couple years ago. We have to get to the point where like we can all say, and like I want everyone to say this out loud, like sex work is work. Sex work is work. And like there are these issues like that are still considered taboo. And like for me to talk about what happened to my body, like I have to reference the word vagina. I have one of those. Other people in the audience also do, right? Like it's okay. So I think part of like the progressive movement is really recognizing that until we have our most basic right, which is the ability to make decisions about what happens to our own bodies and what we do with our own bodies, then frankly, we really can't achieve anything else, any of the other issues we want to work on. Like that's got to be first and foremost.
Other issues that defining progressivism today?
Black Lives Matter movement, 100%. We just saw maybe the largest protest movement in the history of this country, less than 2 years ago. And it obviously was catalyzed by an incident of police brutality and issues of policing and public safety are of course at the core of that. But the movement was about so much more. It's about really understanding that, after the election of a black president, many had been pushing for it for a while, thought we'd enter this post-racial phase, that we could stop talking about race and that this was some sign that everything was okay. And I think, after, his 2 terms, we see the backlash to that, and we understand, okay, not only is the condition of black people and other people of color and indigenous folks in our country still not where it needs to be, we still have this undercurrent of really overt racism, right, throughout the country, right? We can't pretend that in any way, shape, or form that the folks that are, making up that movement, that are backing folks like Trump, aren't also in positions of power, making decisions that affect all of our lives, right? Aren't making hiring decisions, aren't making academic entry decisions, aren't doing all the things that determine success or failure in this country. So for our organization, the Austin Justice Coalition, ensuring that black folks in particular, but people of color more broadly across our community, really achieve what we're capable of and have opportunity and have equal access and equal rights respected throughout all of our various institutions and systems. So, it's really, really critical that progressivism really be looking at and really be challenging institutions at every level that continue to be infected by structural racism, right? Continue to have differences in how they treat people up and down. And then we understand that those differences experienced in childhood only compound across life and manifest in all these other different barriers and ultimate impediments to people as they progress through their lives and diminish the lives of millions and millions of people in this country. And so we can't sit idly by and continue to allow that to happen. We have to continue to fight. And where possible and where necessary, we have to look at actually dismantling some of these systems that have been infected in such a way that it's been pervasive, it's been decades, and it can't be changed. So Black Lives Matter, 100%. I'll also, because I don't know if it'll be mentioned, I'll just put out there the environmental issues. Climate change is maybe the greatest crisis that we face and threatens everybody. So if we're not talking about bold responses to that, then who is? What are we actually gonna do to have sustainable, ongoing life on this planet?
I think that the way that this is framed in the media normally is it's either the economy or it's identity politics. Like progressives only care about identity politics. It's BLM, it's transphobia, it's abortion, all these like social issues. But what I beg progressives to do is like every time say, that they bring up transphobia or BLM or abortion, any of these things, or, climate justice, that the common thread is economics. That we're talking about fundamentally changing the structure of our economy so that the most people benefit as possible, rather than just, the top, 10%, top 2%, top 1%. Progressives should be about how do we, through each of these different lenses, improve the economic situation for all of us.
Absolutely agree. And it's the difference when you get that first job that takes you out of an hourly wage to a salaried position, if you've had the opportunity to do that. And, I've had conversations with people who have recently gone through that. And the difference between knowing if you're going to have enough money to get the bus versus knowing if you have enough money I can't decide between the sweater and the shirt, so I can get both. Or even that is a luxury. If I don't know if I can catch this bus and make it home in time to dinner, but I can catch this bus and get some takeout. Things like that can make a big difference in your life, and that's all economics. And that's such a small scale that people don't think about, but it can make such a big difference in people's lives.
Also, progressives don't have to have an anti-business message.
Right.
It's actually monopoly, corporatization of the economy that has caused this stratification. And, we should be talking about being pro-entrepreneur, pro-small business, pro-worker, really owning the labor movement, but not in such a way that it's like, we hate corporations. No, we hate corporations that are bad actors who are exploiting their labor force. So I encourage everyone to adopt like a pro-business message in whatever area of work they're in. So whatever issue you touch on.
All of that. I mean, it's all been said. There's nothing I can really elaborate on. I'll tell you a story though. My favorite movie, and it's bad because 80s movies, when you go back and look at them now, you're like, oh my God. My mom let me watch that? So, Trading Places. Mortimer, the Duke brothers. They took poor Louis, this wealthy, affluent, very posh individual, and they took his life and they swapped him out with Billy Ray Valentine, who's Eddie Murphy's character. Billy Ray Valentine's a hustler. He's a street dude. And they bet $1 that they could ruin his life and make his. But then they stand in the bathroom as they're having this conversation about the transition of the experiment. They say, so do we keep him on? Billy Ray Valentine is killing it. He's making them money and commodities, pork belly, oranges. He's doing the thing. He picks it up so fast because so frequently people like me who aren't necessarily destined for success by way of my circumstances, right? He got it. And so he figured it out so fast. He gamed the game so fast. But then they stand in the bathroom and discuss whether or not they'll keep him on as the executive. And I'm not going to use the N-word, but they called him the N-word and said, no way we're going to have this N-word run our company, right? That's the game, y'all. I think to all of y'all's points, right, including the economic component, one of the things that I have to frequently do is give people bad news. Frequently give people bad news. And when you're the messenger and the news is bad, guess who's the bad guy? You. So I'm the singular Black council member on an 11-member body in the 11th largest city in the nation, the capital city of Texas. We will very soon be the 9th, then the 8th, then the 6th. And we will still always only have one, y'all, because 2 white men shook hands. It's called the Gentleman's Agreement. They said, we'll always have one, like the Duke brothers, right? That said, it's virtually impossible for a Black person to win a seat that's not East Austin in this city. D9, D10, you can't make enough money to win that seat if you Black in this city. So when we're talking about progressivism, if you look at me and you think I'm your friend because you have a sign in your yard that says, in this house we believe, get out of here with that. No, that's not helping me.
Yeah.
Your agency, that helps me. Your agency and you taking the opportunity to be bold when it's not convenient, when it's uncomfortable, and when it's painful. And you go, you know what? This is all our problem. I'm going to suffer right alongside you today because we are human. When COVID hit, was it particular? No, it got you, I got all of us. Eventually, right? When that snowstorm hit, it got all of us.
Yep.
When our grid goes out, it gets all of us. So we have to look at some of the issues that are so pervasive, to your point, the underlying, the undercurrent, that underbelly. Until it's all of our problem, y'all, then it's just my problem. So as the singular Black council member, I get calls from Seguin, Dallas, people call me from the East Coast. If they have any connection to the city of Austin, that's a Black issue, they still call me. I'm not their council member, but when you operate in deference to the singular Black council member, guess what that means? She works 5 times harder than her colleagues. That's not fair. I don't have any more budget than they do. I still got to deal with this tiny staff that's underpaid and overworked, doing all the work because y'all operate in deference to me. And that's not fair. So I think ultimately what we're talking about is fairness. I think from a climate justice perspective, we're talking about fairness. From an economic we're the most economically segregated city in the country. That's not fair. People not having autonomy over their bodies. That's not fair. So I know the word fair makes some people cringe, right? It's never going to be fair, but it should be just. And so I think ultimately at the end of the day, all these things are directly connected. When I have to tell people, listen, that little 800 square foot pier and beam piece of shit house across the street, in 2 years, it's going to be worth $3 million and nobody can afford it. They didn't change nothing about that house since 1956. But some investor somewhere is going to be able to come in here and blow it up and make a lot of money on it. This is a Maynard Road. This is a major transit corridor. So some of the bad news I have to give is about land use. It's like, guys, you think I like these zoning cases that come across my desk? Half of them make me want to cry. But it's real. Those people own that property outright. That's private property. So when we think about development, we're thinking about the monopoly man with his monocle and top hat, twisting his mustache, People got to build stuff. So we have to take a different stance on how we're looking at land use and development and how we allocate land. Guys, we're not going to be able to all fit if we keep trying to do that. This is a major transit corridor. That should at least have 200 people in it right now. It should, but it won't, and it doesn't, because there are people who benefit from being exclusive with the use and the application of land and mobility. We gotta be able to get around. We gotta be able to live somewhere. But if we're not having real conversations that are very difficult, frankly, when you say, listen, I already know you finna live in Elgin or Niederwald, pick one, and go on and do that right now. Jump on that school board, jump on that city council, and do a regional takeover, because you know it's coming. You won't be able to afford $740,000 for your house, and there's only so many private dollars coming in for us to make the investments in community land trust and other opportunities to be able to have people age in place, stay in place. But if we're not willing to have the hard talks, y'all, we ain't talking about nothing.
And honestly, that land use conversation, it cuts across all the other issues we're talking about.
Yeah.
It has to do with homelessness. It has to do with mobility of different economic classes, of different racial groups. It has to do with the environment. The singular thing we can do to halt climate change is redesign our cities and design them in ways that a lot of Austinites don't want to talk about. It means less lawns. It means less single family housing. It means a lot of stuff. And I do want to just give a quick kudos to the council member, because when you're running for city council in Austin, you can't touch that issue with a 10-foot pole, because all the wealthy landowners in Austin still own our elections. And so you're not allowed to talk about land use. And it sucks that it has to be the only Black council member that's out here talking about that. So I just want to add my voice to that conversation, that if you're still sitting here and you're against reforming our land development code, then you're part of the problem.
When you mentioned If you all hadn't had your caffeine yet this morning, I think we've just given you a pretty good dose of it in the first half hour of this panel. What that land use conversation, though, takes us to our next question, which is, what aspects of progressive beliefs and culture should be emphasized to bring more people into progressive culture? And housing and development of cities and land use is a perfect example of that. But one of the things I like to say at Progress Texas is that one of the questions that was asked me in 2018 is, has the progressive movement gone too far left? And my answer to that was, progressive issues are mainstream issues. If they're branded as progressive issues, that's fine. But it doesn't mean that they don't have wide acceptance. Climate change is widely accepted in this country. Land use is widely accepted as a problem. Voting rights is not a progressive issue. It is an everyone issue. The homeless debate is something that, regardless of what side you are on that issue, brought everybody into it and forced that conversation. There are so many things that I think can bring people in. What's the best way to do it, Chris?
Well, I mean, I think...
or what's the best issue to onboard people?
Yeah, well, I think ultimately it's about values. And I think when you can't speak to your position about any issue on the basis of the values that you hold that underpin that perspective, then you're going to lose people. People aren't going to want to go with that. But where you can find shared values with people and make that the basis of any conversation, whether it's about social issues, economic issues, or any issue, I think that's where you have the real opportunity. And to your point, I think that many of the values that undergird the progressive movement are really widely, they're almost universally shared. And so if we can get out of the, particularly like the social media kind of back and forth, and how, so much of the language gets made pejorative ultimately by one side or the other, and abandon some of those, I would say just like, terms that have gotten to this point, and really talk about the values that undergird what it is you're putting out there. I think that's how you really move people, no matter what it is. So, I think, you jest earlier, but I think most people actually want to live in a fair society, and if they feel like they really don't, then they have a problem with that, And so if we can talk about the issue of fairness, and then that's going to get you around to, understanding why it's important to support trans rights, why it's important to support, voting rights, why it's important to support all these different issues, then I think there's a real opportunity to expand support for those things, and to get people to understand why it's important to take action, which is ultimately like the main thing. And to yours as well, council member, putting a sign up is good. It doesn't hurt. It's not bad, but it also, if that's all you're doing, then you're not doing anything really, right? And so what we really need is for people to understand really these issues, to make that values-based argument, to talk about, like, this is important to me because I believe in this, and if you believe in this, it should be important to you too. And here's an opportunity for you to do something about it. And so those are the conversations that I hope everybody can have. And I think the other big thing for me is just that, the fate of the nation and the fate of the state, and because of where Texas sits in this nation, the state of the nation, and because of where this nation sits in the world, the state of the world is very much dependent right now on white folks talking to their people, your family, your friends. When we look at the trends in not just voting but in polling on so many important issues, the folks that are on the other side are mostly white folks, and so these are conversations that ultimately need to be had between people that are in relationship with each other. It's not just white people, but mostly it is, right? And because you're not gonna pull someone back from the throes of incredible misinformation and these social media black holes by logic and reason. You're only gonna do it on the basis of the relationships that you have with people. It hurts me to hear you say that, because I believe that you value this thing, which I also value. How can we come to accord about this, right? How can we have some shared knowledge and shared facts about these topics, and ultimately If you know, a lot of white folks don't change their opinions about some of these issues, we're not going to get there. And so I really encourage everybody who's in relationship deeply with white folks to really talk to your friends, your families, your neighbors about all this stuff.
Identifying that shared value. Maybe we can't agree on the outcome, but if we can agree on the value, right? Like I remember during the homeless debate, one of the ways I would start these conversations was that no one wants to see people living under a bridge, especially the people living under the bridge. And that was kind of a way to start the issue. And maybe we disagree on the outcome, but we could agree on the value, right? And so, Lauren, I know you wanted to jump in here a minute ago.
Well, I just wanted to ask you a question about, if you could clarify what terms brought us to this.
Well, I mean, I think how something like Black Lives Matter becomes BLM. Right. And then BLM becomes this pejorative in a lot of spaces online. I'm not going to say BLM. It's Black Lives Matter. That's what it is. And so there's a whole host of them that where that happens. And a lot of people just start adopting, these terms again, where they've become like this pejorative. I think we'd be surprised where people are at if we actually put things in real talk, real terms, and not these boogeymen that are created about these different topics. So
jump in here, Alicia.
Oh, well, mine was a little bit different. Your original question, which is like, what are the issues?
Yeah.
And I think one that's like a gateway issue, and coincidentally like a gateway drug, but like decriminalizing drugs. We have decriminalizing weed is on the ballot in May in Austin. We all have an opportunity to vote on that, and that is like huge bipartisan issue. Like people want to be able to make money off that industry.
An economic issue.
The economic side of it. People want to see fewer people in jail, especially fewer Black folks in jail, and fewer people of color more broadly who have been disproportionately impacted by incarceration in terms of selling and buying weed. So first off, decriminalizing weed. I also last night was at an event with the governor of Oregon, and I got her to record a video, which again, plug on my Insta this morning, but the Oregon just decriminalized all drugs. And you look at the case study of the country of Portugal, and it has improved public health. It has decreased incarceration. It has improved public safety. It's they're looking at certain drugs as like therapy now, like all this research that's being done on psilocybin and mushrooms for PTSD, for so many different mental health issues. So like, I think in Austin, we have to vote on decriminalizing weed in May. I sit on the Human Rights Commission, tried to decriminalize all drugs a couple years ago. Austin is not quite as progressive as we like to think we are. But I do think that this is kind of like a gateway issue that brings both sides together, and you can use different arguments to talk about it. But again, it's kind of that shared idea, like everyone sees the value in that issue. So I think it's a great way to bring people to the table.
I think the issue of fairness in general is a good starting place for people, right? Like I talked about how nobody likes to see someone living under a bridge, especially people who live there. I've had conversations with a friend of mine, somebody I ran into happenstance and just created an odd friendship with. He is an older man. He is a conservative. We get together for coffee a couple times a year, and he hates payday lenders because of the unfairness, the inherent unfairness of payday lenders. But it all comes down to fairness. You could say the same thing about immigration. We haven't talked about immigration today. I come from an immigrant family. My brothers and I were the first ones born here. I don't look like what people think of when they think of a first generation American, but we're Peruvian. It's a little different. The way we got here, you can't get here that way these days. And it's just the issue of fairness plays into that. And I think fairness is an important way to onboard a lot of these conversations. Voting rights is an issue of fairness.
With regards to fairness, typically though, when you're talking to someone who's a conservative, the driving value to them is generally more of the freedom messaging.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about the mindset, the perspective of, what is the conservative outlook versus the progressive outlook. Conservatives, and I live in this world, I swim in this world, I do, so much like reporting on right-wing movements, right? So they see the world as inherently unfair. And I got through it. I pulled myself up from my bootstraps and I made it, and you can too. And I don't think that,
I'm going to pull the ladder up with you.
Right. And there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
Somebody's paying for it and it's not going to be me. And so I think that as progressives, it would behoove us to, yes, we should appeal to people's sense of fairness, but keep in mind at the same time, like, how can I deliver that message in a way that appeals to someone's sense of freedom?
That's right.
So,
I think what you're talking about is also framing,
yeah.
right? And
It's
the
the
way
framing.
we introduce the subject, the way we introduce ourselves to a topic is as important as the way we talk about the topic. It's the starting point. Because a lot of people make their decisions in the first 3 to 10 seconds of seeing something, what Malcolm Gladwell called thin slicing. And that's, framing is an important part of it.
But so, in a business context, like if we're talking about how am I going to talk to somebody about the economy, and I want to, break up monopolies or, regulate more, conservatives are so anti-regulation. Well, let's talk about fairness. If you're trying to start a small business, you're never going to be able to operate or compete on the same plane
Right.
as the big boys if they have an inherent structural advantage. And we've got to keep pointing that out at every turn that we can. Like, these are the corporate villains that are holding you down.
I'm gonna give you an example. I'll tell you all a story about the use of words, going back to the conversation about marijuana and economics, which, by the way, the unfairness of it, it's like the black and brown communities have suffered so much, and now it seems like the white venture capitalists are making all the money off of it. But when we at Progress Texas were working on this issue starting back in 2014, we started calling it, should Texas regulate marijuana? Knowing that it was a bipartisan issue. People hated the word regulate because to them it didn't sound like legalizing, but we couldn't say legalizing back then because it wasn't a way to bring everybody in. We didn't have that kind of support yet. But when we said marijuana policy reform, everyone was on board. I got this email from a guy and he was like, I am a redneck Bubba, pro-military, pro-gun, this, that, and the other thing. But I am also on board with marijuana. If that's what it takes to get it passed and join up with the libs, I'm in, brothers. You're at this point in Texas where 75% of the electorate is on board. And the lawmakers, specifically the Republican lawmakers, are way behind the electorate on this. And this is the definition of progressive. This is progressing, pushing forward. The left can own this issue and push it forward because the majority of the people are there.
Because their love of weed outweighs their hate of trans folks. It really does. It actually does.
My organization, American Family Voices, we have a project that we're doing right now called Factory Towns. And we released a report which looks at the decline in Democratic support in manufacturing communities that are neither urban nor rural. They're basically like on the periphery. It's, figuring out what is the messaging that we need to direct at these swing voters that went from, blue support to red to voting for Trump, right? How do we message to them and win them back? Because the Democratic Party, if we don't start to win back, and this isn't just like white working class voters, because the people in these towns are Black, they're Hispanic.
Yep.
Like it's a very common misconception that this is just like white working class. There's a lot of important work being done. The research shows that when you talk to economically disadvantaged folks in these types of communities, that when you marry a race class narrative to the economic narrative, that it's actually more powerful, more impactful. And so anyway, the work that we're doing is to try to figure out how do we counter, and we just got polling back from Lake Research Partners, and people are very distrustful of Democrats. They think that they talk down to them, that they're condescending, that at the end of the day, the thing that is like a winning message is going after the corporate villains. Because people recognize that big corporations are squeezing them. And the more that you can lean into that and name like specific bad actors, like the better. But you can find the report online, and I'm happy to share it with folks.
Corporate villains, as
Do you mind if I
mentioned
add
at
something
South
to
by
that, Ed?
Southwest.
If I add something to that real quick. So to your point about the messaging being unified, like collectively unified. So one of the things that I watch happen is I watch people get scared to death by completely inaccurate information. But if that message is unified and it's quick and easy, and I find that as a group, You know, I think we probably run the gamut as people who identify as progressive. I personally, I don't care what letter you have next to your name. If it's smart policy, I'm with it. And so I think that's something we're not willing to do. Like, I don't bleed blue Democrat, but you have to pretend that you do in order for people to see you. But council's supposed to be nonpartisan. Do you know not one person has ever asked me how I identify? They assume, right? Everybody assumes I'm a Democrat, right? All that to say, if it's smart policy, get behind it. That's what we should all be doing. But to that point, though, I think us being so scattered and not unified and not working collectively and the messaging being so piecemeal that I hate to say the other side, because there is no other side, right? It's there's no them and us. But I think having a unified message is where we're really failing. It's how people get scared by misinformation all the time.
A unified message and a concise message. But I want to focus on one thing you said, which is the assumption, right? When we talk about the assumption, it's like asking people in this room, what do you like to drink, Coke or Pepsi? Well, 30 years ago, you might have gotten an answer that the percentages added up to 100, but now these days, you may not get anybody saying Coke or Pepsi, but it's the same way when we look at voters, right? And too many times, we just put people into buckets that are like, let's say we're talking about college-educated men. Well, a college-educated man that went to Emerson is not going to be the same as a college-educated man that went to Texas Tech or A&M. And those nuances, I think, require a deeper analysis of who we're talking to.
Or the
and
assumption that all Latinos are going to vote Democrat. Look what's happening in the Valley right now. Like, there's so many Latina women running as Republicans. And to piggyback off of what the council member was saying and people making this assumption that you're a Democrat, I think being a progressive and being a Democrat are two wildly different things. And I think being a progressive actually can vibe a lot more with the right than being a Democrat can. Because you look at like the support of like folks that had for people like Bernie over Hillary. And a lot of that was coded misogyny as well. But like, you look at the right and a lot of them can vibe with what the progressives are saying in a way that they can't with these limousine liberals that they can't identify with.
I was
so
told
I think
not
being a
to,
liberal
but
and
I knocked Republican doors when I was knocking. I knocked every door.
Every door.
I was like, okay, I'm knocking all these doors. Bang, bang, bang. My name is Natasha Harper-Madison. I want to be your council member.
I bet you a lot of them were black doors.
And when I tell you, like we went back and looked at my numbers. Do you know how many Republicans voted for me? Because I said, I want to show up with smart, progressive, pragmatic policy that will help people have a better life in this city. I didn't say anything about race. I didn't say anything about class. I didn't say anything about my gender. I said I want a smart, progressive, pragmatic policy that will help people live a better life in this city.
Yeah.
And they voted for me.
And the fact that you even came to their door that you approached that conversation was so important. I'm so sorry, guys. We're out of time. Thank you for getting up early and coming out and seeing it this morning. Give it up for your panel.